Dear friends, a very good Saturday morning to you all, and I'd like to wish you warmly welcome to the S&D Finnish delegation seminar, NATO, EU and Finland. And I'd like to wish you warmly welcome to all our viewers on Facebook or following our stream there. It's been a pleasure to organize this seminar together with Eero Heinäluoma, my colleague, and the S&D group. This seminar couldn't be more topical. The Finnish public opinion on the EU membership are now more positive than for decades. We've seen a great public opinion change as regards NATO and NATO membership. Now, majority of Finnish people support Finland's NATO membership. After this seminar, the Finnish Social Democratic Party and its parliamentary group and party council will organize its meeting to publish its stance on NATO, and the Swedish counterpart, Social Democratic Party, will have its meeting tomorrow. And very often international media has approached me recently and asked about Finnish public opinion on NATO membership and other security policy issues, and many journalists have asked me how come the Finnish public opinion changed so quickly in Finland from 20% up to 60% almost overnight, and wait until, well, I just told them wait until next Thursday, that is last Thursday, when the Prime Minister and the President told their NATO stance in public, and I told journalists that it could even approach 100%. So there are very few people who now think that Finland should not join NATO. We have a fantastic list of speakers today in terms of security policy, EU policy and so on. We have a good geographical representation here. We have people who work in the EU. We have Kenneth Forslund from the Swedish Parliament and also MEP Marek Belka from Poland. Presentations are held in either Finnish or in English, and in this room we also have a simultaneous interpretation available, so channel number 1 should be used if you want to listen to Finnish interpretation when somebody speaks English here. Unfortunately, on Facebook, only the original language is heard. As you can see, my colleague Eero Heinäluoma is not here. Eero has sent his message, however, his greetings. I read it now. Dear seminar participants, dear friends, I say good morning to you from home. We've been familiar with corona restrictions for the past 2 years, and now, after 2 years for waiting, I received a PCR test result, a positive corona test, so I join you from home, from my living room couch. I'm so sorry to be ill today and I cannot participate. We've been organizing this seminar for a long time with great efforts, and I wish you a very nice day at the seminar. It's very topical as regards Finland, NATO, Sweden and the security policy choices. Have a nice seminar, have a nice weekend and all the best. So that were Eero's greetings from his home couch, and I'm sure that he's following us on Facebook, and you can also follow us online. Well, dear friends, the situation in Europe has dramatically changed on 24th of February due to Russia's brutal war of aggression against Ukraine. It changed concretely, but also it had a great emotional effect. Our beliefs in economic cooperation, international collaboration could prevent war between states was at stake. We have strongly believed in Finland that we have a good neighbor relation to Russia and Russian people, but now it turned out that it is not true. we need new foreign policy. We believed that wars are too expensive for both parties, that mutual dependence strengthens. We often talked about threshold, that we have a very high threshold for war in Finland. Nobody wants to attack Finland. Well, as we have seen now, the authoritarian leaders and military forces do not care. They do not care what the war costs to population or national economies or humanity as a whole. In Finland, we have a possibility to increase this threshold, make this threshold even higher by joining NATO, and that is the reason for I also support NATO since this February. War is very expensive. War destroys food security, energy security, and it unstabilizes economies. We have a very deep response to Russian war in Europe, not only in the EU but also in transatlantic cooperation. Finland will now join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization as part of its collective security. I've been very impressed by Western intelligence, all the reports that we have received on what happened in Ukraine. Many think that 24th of February was the first day of war. However, we already read in the newspapers many days before that date that there were massive numbers of Russian troops on the Ukrainian border. Our seminar topic is very serious today, but I still have a lot of optimism. I believe that with good cooperation we can achieve peace and stability and increase sense of security in Europe. After Russia's attack on Ukraine, the European countries have been very swift in their actions. Already the 6th sanction package has now been released, and it hopefully will be approved soon in all member states. In the S&D group, we strongly believe that we cannot continue financing Russia's economy by buying fossil fuels from Russia. The EU countries buy fossil energy by 750 million euro per day. That is a massive contribution to Russia's military spending. I checked this figure for many times because I couldn't believe my eyes. So it is really 750 million per day. So natural gas, oil and coal. Coal has already been sanctioned, and oil is also progressing well. Transition periods have been given, and now leaders are discussing natural gas. That is, of course, the biggest financial contribution towards Russia. Of course, we have to find alternative solutions for heating our homes in Europe, and energy is also related to energy security, and European solidarity is here very important. Now that Russia has itself cut gas in Poland and Hungary, this challenge became a European challenge. It doesn't apply to individual countries only. We have to work together, supporting and helping each other. The war will, of course, shake Europe's unity and stability. As social democrats, we have always paid great attention to not forgetting the poor and the disadvantaged. In Finland, for example, we have to adjust social security and social benefits, social security payments for families accordingly. We have to show solidarity also within societies. We support those EU countries that are very dependent on Russian energy. We are living difficult times in Finland now, and the coming weeks and months will show how Russia reacts to Finland's application to NATO. However, it would be much more expensive to be left out of NATO, and we all also have to remember that Ukrainians suffer much more. Women, children, soldiers and old people have an unbearable situation, and all the media coverage of Ukrainian war shows us how brutal the war has been. We are also well prepared for cyber attacks and hybrid attacks. We've seen, for example, how a cyber attack was directed to a factory in Finland. So there are new vulnerabilities due to cyber attacks. And the Russian troops stole 5 million euro worth agricultural machinery from Ukraine. They took them to Chechnya, and when the tractors were there, they couldn't switch on the tractors anymore. And the producer in Ukraine had shut down did some cyber measures in Ukraine so that the tractors could not be switched on in Chechnya. So cyber security is a very important issue in the European Union now, and we've been working on this in several occasions, how to strengthen our networks and protect them from cyber attacks, and how to deepen our collaboration in cyber security. Sanctions are progressing well, and especially this has to do with energy industries and technological industries in Russia. As we know, we need cloud computing and chips and many other high-tech products nowadays, and without Russian access to critical chips, Russia cannot produce new armament systems. For example, the United States has blocked chip supplies to many Russian military industries, and the effects have already been seen. Some military factories have been closed down in Russia due to sanctions now. And of course, this makes us think the European vulnerabilities as well. We have to establish new chip factories in Europe as well, and we have to make sure that our societies remain secure and stable. Dear seminar participants, the topic of today is very serious, and we are living difficult times, but we have to find solutions for the future.
It's not worth of attacking Finland. And everything in English because we have a great speaker list today. The first speaker we will have is Esa Pulkkinen, expert from Finland, and he is the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Defense. And he will give insights into EU defense policy making and the EU cooperation with the NATO. He has been previously a Director General of the EU military staff in Brussels. I remember very good seminars last mandate already in Brussels, so a true expert, a Finnish, but also deep insights from a European perspective. Please, Esa, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mia-Petra. Hyvää huomenta kaikille. Lyhyt esittely.
Good morning, everyone.
Käytyä läpi.
Mia-Petra already
tuon Eero Heinäluoman kanssa keskusteltiin ja päätin, että mä puhun englanniksi johtuen siitä, että mä puhun enemmän eurooppalaisesta tulokulmasta kuin ehkä suomalaisesta tulokulmasta, mutta toisaalta ne on yksi ja sama tänä päivänä. Very good morning to everyone. I will speak in English for a number of reasons. One reason being that I tried to provide you with a European view on defense and security. That's based on my personal experiences in Brussels. I've spent more than 10 years during the last 20 years in Brussels working for EU's security and defense institutions. Second thing is more practical. I was interviewed by Helsinki Sanomat 2 months ago. They had listened to my speech in one of the webinars that was held in English. And the journalist told me that please, Secretary General, Permanent Secretary, use more English and speak more in English. You are more clear and we understand your message is better. Hopefully that matters also today. I have put here only one slide. It's a description of how I see the role of Europe and European Union in defense and security. There are three circles: values, interests, and protection of Europe. All these layers support each other. It's also a question of the geography and geographical distribution of security and defense, also globally. The outer layer describes the promotion of European values. The European values is not a very concrete issue, but it also describes the European Union's and Europe's reach out globally. EU is a global actor. Global actor in terms of economy, trade, also values which together that they emphasize the outer layer is also a basement for the all approaches that EU use. We share common values. That is an important cornerstone of EU actions anywhere. Also, the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine a little bit more than 2 months ago shows that values are important. The common, usually and universally shared common values, rule-based world order is broken. And the emphasis is then to restore the values as a basement for the approach for the security globally in years to come. The second layer that I'm going to go a little bit more detail is the defense of European interests. That is traditionally geographically defined to be actions outside of the European borders. European borders in Africa, Middle East, sometimes even in Europe, but they're outside of the European Union borders. And the practical tools have been traditionally EU crisis management actions, civilian and military crisis management operations. I was 3.5 years also the commander of European Union unarmed military training missions in Africa. 1,500 soldiers in 3 different locations: Somalia, Central African Republic, and in Mali, where actually I had an opportunity and pleasure to also to engage with the local people and at least try to deliver stability and security in terms of training and educating the armed forces of respective nations. But the beauty of the thing is that the European Union and Europe has much more tools, not only military ones: economical, political, diplomatic. And that provides a basis for the EU's integrated approach, by which we can provide a long-term and even more sustainable solutions that not only using by military forces to do it. Unfortunately, the situation in certain parts of the Africa, in particular Sahel, are not very permissive for time being. But my message is very clear: don't forget Africa, don't forget South. We in Finland tend to think that the security is only against the background of the East and what is threatening us from the East. It's equally important that we look to South. It's a European solidarity, and we should not forget that. How we manage to deal with Africa and the Southern Front will be, if we will be successful, to investment to our children and grandchildren. I am a true believer on that. However, today we are talking in European Union strategic compass in the aftermath of the global strategy published in 2016. And now the really angle is 360 degrees, as described in this slide. Also, the unprovoked Russian action in Ukraine, against Ukraine, has provoked European Union. European Union is supporting Ukraine. This is an example, one example being that over 1.5 billion euros from the fund called European Peace Facility has been given to Ukraine to support the provision of the equipment, military equipment, including lethal equipment. That's quite revolutionary in European Union terms, and I think this decision was very right. The other very powerful sanction, much more powerful tool and measure compared to 2014 is are the sanctions. The sanctions put EU in the front line, actually. EU is in the front line, NATO is backing, preserving and supporting the security, collective security and defense of the NATO nations. So EU's role has been very active and also very supportive and very concrete in terms of support to Ukraine. Then the inner circle, which has been debated during last years and decades quite a lot. It's in particular in Finland. It's a protection of Europe. When talk with the Finns and talk about defense, we Finns think, and some of us, I included in long time ago, thought that defense is only that to do something in rifle in your hands somewhere in the east. But in terms of defense, the description is much more broader and deeper. And protection of Europe is in Finnish terms more on security and defense. The outcomes in concrete terms are related to more on security, in Finnish turvallisuus, that we deal with other authorities, not with the militaries. Where actually EU has very powerful tools against so-called hybrid threats, for example. EU Commission in particular, with its legislative powers, is and will be an important actor in years to come. But then on the military side, it goes for the military capabilities. We actually had quite a revolutionary development during last decade. That was based on the intentions and guidance provided by the head of states to promote the capabilities production in Europe, military capabilities production in Europe. The head of the state's perspective was, to an extent, to support the defense industries. Defense industries, because they are the source of the innovation, they provide a lot of work for the people, and also they emphasize that EU itself can work also in military domain. And also the idea is and was to improve the cohesion of the very fragmented European defense industry. That was one driver. The second driver is and was more operational. How to improve EU's capability to go for the crisis management. I was working many years in order to create some command and control elements for the European Union, for the crisis management operations. Recently, according to the so-called strategic compass, EU is going to improve its capability to react also militarily crises outside its borders by increasing the numbers of the high readiness troop up to 5,000 troops, to be seen how it will go forward. But certainly the capability development and the very essence of capability development is the fact that the EU is very unique compared to NATO or any other organization. We have on the one hand supranational commission with a lot of economical power, of course legislative powers as well, and we have on the other hand the member states. And to put in Brussels together with supranational commission and the intergovernmental structures like the European Union Defence Agency has provided a pretty good outcome. Outcome that provide the support for the joint production of military capabilities. And these military capabilities are not only for the European Union, they are also for the NATO nations, because the Union, neither NATO, they don't own the capabilities, military capabilities, they are owned by the member states. And more we can put our requirements together and more we can provide a financial incentives, the better will be the outcome. It's for the Europe as such So the protection of Europe, for me, it's not only the protection of the European Union, protection of also the allies, NATO allies that are not the members of the European Union, also some neutral countries like the Swiss. I've made some points with our Swiss colleagues, and you need to keep in your mind that Europe support also your security and contribute actively to EU actions. So that's really a good process. We have developed European Union defense funds. That has been very beneficial. Actually, today we have received the support that value is roughly 10 million euros for the Finnish defense industry already. I'm very happy of that, so that we get more than we invest at the moment. Secondly, we have so-called permanent structured cooperation. That is how we guide, from a member state point of view, European Union member states to use their capabilities and not to use the capabilities, but also to develop their capabilities. And also EU-NATO dimension is very strongly there. We have, I'll take one example. It's the action on the permanent structured cooperation, military mobility. That is to promote the mobility of the military troops in Europe. And eventually it's more for the NATO's purposes to support the movement of the troops from east to west, but also provides certain advantages for European Union. And there the power of the Union is much higher than the individual NATO nations or NATO as an institution. Of course, there's financing. European Union will finance the military mobility, improving infrastructure, airfields, roads, etc., for dual-use purposes. And we may benefit here in Finland, that project as well. Then EU is a role as a power in terms of regulations. EU can help with the regulatory powers to overcome certain hurdles that we have as a EU level. And then, of course, the national legislation, that is something that needs to be tackled. This combination has really been quite a revolutionary in European terms, and as we have seen now what takes place in Ukraine, it's more than needed. Then, if we talk about the conceptual way, the NATO and European Union. Of course, NATO is an institution mainly for the collective defense at the moment, but also other responsibilities. But when we develop our strategies, I would say that we deal with the two sides of the same coin. European Union strategic compass and NATO strategic concept are the two sides of the same coin. And that is very good, because that further emphasizes the transatlantic unity, where we also need to engage with United States and Canada. I'm very happy to announce that after many years of challenges, United States is also part of the European Union capability development in terms of participating in permanent structured cooperation and military mobility. Then on EU solidarity, a few words still. That is extremely important for us. And in the Finnish and also in French approaches, at least, the so-called Article 42.7 has been a very important tool. It has been only used once in November 2015 by France. And its power is not in institution, but in the fact that according to Lisbon Treaty, this is legally binding for the member states. Which means that should one member state, like Finland, be a subject for the armed aggression or equivalent, we could ask the other EU member states to support Finland, also by military means. That is in the very essence the simile that Prime Minister of United Kingdom a few days ago provided us with, so-called security guarantees. But the difference is there, that with UK, that is outside of the EU, as we know, unfortunately. That is my statement. my view. But it is not legally binding, it's political statement. But in legally, the legally binding nature comes from the Lisbon Treaty and EU. So this is a very powerful tool which could be shown in terms of the solidarity if we need, and if we need to activate it in months to come. Ladies and gentlemen, Finland joined the European Union in 1995. One of the most decisive criteria behind our decision to join European Union, it was toughly debated, as we all recall that, was the security policy. We thought here in Finland that the membership in European Union will provide us so-called implicit security guarantees against Russian hybrid threats, including economical and political pressure or even blackmailing. Today, as a consequence of Russian invasion to Ukraine, we think here this might not be enough. There is no trust on Russia anymore as a responsible actor to comply with the rules we agreed here in Helsinki in 1975, to echo what Mia Petra has said earlier. Therefore, Finland and Sweden may send their letters to NATO, applications for the NATO membership to Brussels very soon. And it is needless to say that this weekend will be very crucial in that regard. However, we Finns believe that the European Union and Finnish membership in European Union will remain a foundation for prosperity and broader security in Finland and in Europe. EU has demonstrated very strong unity together with the transatlantic community during the time of crisis and war in Ukraine. I'm very proud of that, and we Finns are very proud of that. And perhaps we have never seen such a unity we have seen throughout these few months. EU has been, like I said, mentioned earlier, in the front line on imposing hard sanctions to Russia, and provided also direct support to Ukraine, like I mentioned. We are proud, like I said, on EU's role and what the EU has done. Like Mia Petra said, the support to European Union is higher than ever in Finland, in my country. Together we are stronger. Thank you very much. Kiitos oikein paljon. Olen valmis vastaamaan.
Thank you. I can take questions in Finnish or in English, if you would have
answer
any.
any questions, either in Finnish or English. Joo, ole.
Veikko pyysin ja minua kiinnostaa toi Ukrainan sota siltä osalta, että
I'm interested in Ukrainian war as regards future. What is the future of the Ukrainian war? What happens if Russia becomes weaker in Ukraine? What will China's role be? What about China? Will China support Russia with arms before the end of the war? Have you any ideas on that?
Joo, kiitoksia kysymyksestä. Vastaan tähän suomeksi.
Thank you. I'll respond in Finnish to this question. China has supported Russia, and there the point of departure is that everything that weakens the Western world is positive to China, but they have their own crisis. They are undergoing the corona crisis, which is very tough internally to China, and China is calculating very strictly what to do not to lose its relations, the commercial relations to the Western world. And Russia is less self-sufficient. I think that China doesn't want to interfere in a military way they don't have the will to do it, and they wouldn't have maybe the strength to do it either. But we will have to see for how long will they indirectly support Russia. But I think that this will change in the future, and China is much more a threat to Russia than Europe and NATO.
Talking about NATO and its perspective, what do you think from the perspective of a professional soldier? So what about the future of conscription army in Finland?
Thank you. The outlook is very positive because if Finland accedes to NATO, we still are responsible for defending our own country. And I think that that is the first and foremost thing that NATO is looking for, a country which produces security, defends its own country, and provides balance. And of course there are other military repercussions of this, and Finnish armaments industry is very important here as well. And yesterday I was talking to a war-wounded soldiers meeting, and a thing that came up there, that our reserve forces show NATO countries and other countries in the world how well we know our business in crisis management, in defense policy. And I have no doubts about it that our armaments industry and our reserve forces will receive even more recognition in the future than thus far.
I'd like to ask about the Åland situation. It's a very sensitive area in terms of military. So when we join NATO, what happens to Åland? And does it have any specific effect on Åland?
The Åland position is regulated through international treaties. In 1920 or 21, the Demilitarization Treaty, and there the defense of Åland is the responsibility of Finland. That is stated in this treaty. So Finland will be responsible for that. And I see it so that NATO membership will indirectly also increase the protection of Åland if both Finland and Sweden accede, because then Baltic Sea will become an internal sea of NATO. I don't think that there will be any more dramatic repercussions on that. Finland is prepared to defend militarily Åland, and this is very important also to communicate to the Åland people.
Lauri Nurmi is my name. Well, I think one interesting thing for the public in general would be to understand a bit more. Well, we do have strong defense forces in Finland, but there are some fundamental reasons for why Finland wants to join NATO now and enjoy the Article 5 protection. So for us in Finland, what about what do we need? What do we need more? How should we strengthen our military forces now after application?
The question is almost philosophical, but on the other hand concrete as well. So far we thought that from 1995 EU membership has been sufficient, and it has been. And there we have the so-called indirect security guarantees. Being in a bigger group provides a certain level of security. But now it seems that Russia doesn't recognize any commonly agreed things, such as in 1975, what was agreed back then, and they are not bound by any diplomatic or political agreements. And then we have to reassess whether EU solidarity is a high enough threshold in a situation where Russia would attack Finland. And I have been asked for my opinion. Sometimes I like to play cards, but this time I wouldn't be prepared to do that. And I think that NATO would increase this threshold for Russia to attack Finland. I don't think that we need more military capacity. We have this already is a preparedness to defend Finland from Russia, but what has been shown by the aggression of Russia to Ukraine is now why we need to accede to NATO.
Kiitos valtavan paljon Esa Pulkkinen, kun olit mukana ja annoit kartoituksen. The next speaker we have online, a dear colleague, Marek Melka, comes from Poland. Marek is a former Prime Minister and former Finance Minister of Poland, and very good colleague at the moment, and Vice Chair of the group responsible for the international issues as well. He will discuss the possibility of direction of the EU security policies. And as you maybe heard the last parts, I will translate to you. The question was also that we are around the Baltic Sea, so it's very great to have a southern shore and greetings from the northern side of the Baltic Sea on the historical day for the Finnish democratic structure, also taking the steps towards the NATO membership. But dear Marek, floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, dear friends. First, let me say that I am deeply honored to be invited to talk on this solemn occasion, not probably because of my specific competences in defense matters, but rather because of the historical experience of my country that seems to be quite similar to, in some respects, to the experience of Finland. Let me first say that we are very satisfied with the decision of Finland to join NATO. And we understand that this is a decision resulting from the behavior of our common neighbor. It's Russia that triggered this decision. We would prefer to live in a world of harmony, peace, but this seems to be a distant future in the moment. We are happy to have Finland in NATO because of two main reasons. First, Finland will be a security provider and not just security beneficiary because of its defense capabilities, but also because of the strengths of its nation and of its state. Also, as we once admired Finland for its ability to resist the powerful neighbor in war, more recently we admire Finland for its innovativeness, for the level of education. As a matter of fact, everybody in the world just tries to follow Finland in the famous PISA tests, where you are one of the world leaders. So, welcome in NATO. We are very satisfied and we feel safer with you on board. Now, let me say a few things about the European Union. First, we must realize as the European Union that important problems are not only in Mali and Niger, but next door in our neighborhood. And it's Russia, who is now invading its neighbor. And it was not the first days. Just remember Georgia, remember Ukraine in 2014. Look at what is happening in Transnistria. Constant destabilization of Moldova. So we have to realize the problems are next door and not far away, even if those far away problems are also quite important. Second, we cannot forever outsource security to the United States. Remember I hope, the Donald Trump episode. But how can we be sure that it will not come back? But even with a reasonable, friendly leadership in the US, the interest of this country is more and more focused on China and on China and Far East. And well, by default, we have to take care of our security much higher extent than. Third, we cannot outsource foreign policy to business. Look at the biggest countries in the European Union. They are hostages. They seem to be hostages. The interests of their biggest corporations. This is, no matter how we may be dissatisfied with the quality of political class in today's democracies, they, even imperfectly, represent the long-term interests of their nations. Fourth, we have to build up our own military capacity, including military industry. And here, Finland can play a vital role. As a Pole, I know about our cooperation in Patria production, the armored vehicle production. We have to intensify this in the whole European Union, not to let's say protect ourselves from others, American, British, but we have to rely more on ourselves. And the last thing, as long as Russia is putting it in the shop, Russia that is believing in aggression, believing in so-called strategic depth, there must be not return to business as usual. We cannot simply get back to business as usual as soon as the hostilities fade away. We have to remember, we live in a world of rivalries, and even more a world when hot war becomes a reality. That is why I welcome the decision of Finland to join NATO. We feel safer. We feel more related, more linked to your country. Now, not only within the European Union, but also in NATO. Thank you very much.
Kiitos, Marek. Thank
Marek, can I ask, just as you from Poland, how is the people in Poland seeing now the situation? Because we saw that Poland is very dedicated member in NATO and in European Union, more hesitated on some policies. But how does this war on our continent change the attitude of the Polish citizens?
Well, first, as far as the behavior of the Polish people is concerned, well, here we see a fantastic spontaneous response of civil society organizations, of local governments in helping the refugees. And believe me, this is a problem because we have accepted, we have acquired, well, we don't know exactly how many millions, but it's in millions. So here we see a change in approach towards refugees in general. You may remember that in the not so distant past, Polish government, but also with support of the Polish public, expressed a lot of distrust or even hostility towards foreign immigrants, refugees. Well, maybe because the war is so obvious, so visible, so next door, that people understand the situation much better than in the case of war in Afghanistan or in Syria. As far as the Polish government is concerned, well, you know that we have a far-right Eurosceptic government that is using the war situation to even further its assault on independence of the courts, limiting the rule of law situation. However, first we have, well, the government realizes now that the European Union is not only about money, it's most about security. This is exactly what was the case with the Finnish accession to the EU, because of security. Well, I myself only can deplore that Poland is not a member of the Eurozone. As an economist, I know that the economic argument for Euro adoption is well, it's strong, but it's not without ifs, without let's say some problems. But from the point of view of security, this would obviously increase the position of our country in the core. So this would be my answer.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I also heard some figures that security feeling among the Polish people is also hurt a lot after Ukraine invasion, that people are even mentioning being afraid of the possible Russian actions in Poland.
Well, if you look at the map, you will see the Kaliningrad enclave, which is, well, home of very strong military garrison, and creates a potential problem for the security both of Poland and of Lithuania. And of course, from time to time, it is not personally Putin, but from time to time we have quite exotic, adventurous statements on the part of Russian politicians or media people about, well, Poland should be next, or Poland should be next in line to denazify. Well, that's a new term coined by the Russians recently to overturn legally and democratically elected governments in neighboring countries. So yes, there is a problem there, but we are staunchly within NATO and within the European Union. The people understand it quite well, that membership in the European Union is about security.
I have one more question from the audience, and then we go further, please.
My name is Mikko Pyhä. I'm retired ambassador of Finland. First of all, Poland needs to be congratulated by all of us for the tremendous sacrifice you are doing in helping the millions of Ukrainian refugees. And you are also suffering in many ways. I'd like to ask you if Poland has been victim of foreign organized cyber warfare that would have brought a lot of economic damage to you, and has there been a tendency of increase in the airspace violations? I suppose you're having those too. Thank you.
Well, as far as airspace violations, it has not been a problem. So we are sort of reacting very quickly to any possible incursions. This is probably a problem more of the Baltic Sea than the land territory. As far as the cyber attacks, well, we haven't yet experienced a massive cyber attack. What is present, as in probably most countries, is a massive trolling of Russian troll farms or connected to Russian troll farms. But you know, Polish people are very sensitive to Russian propaganda. But even with this sensitivity, so it is very difficult to be pro-Russian in Poland, especially these days. What is more of a problem is that the current Polish authorities, being very skeptical towards European Union, especially to further integration in the Union, well, play to the hand of Putin, whose probably number one European strategic objective is to weaken or even destroy the European Union. So here, I must say that if Kaczynski or Prime Minister meet Orban, well, the friendship between Kaczynski and Orban has now been shelved a little bit, but if they take part in so-called pro-Putin international with Salvini, Le Pen, and other far-right extremists, well, this is objectively helping Putin.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marek. We thank you, and applause, if you hear the applause.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
It was great pleasure to have you here in Finland on this physical on the screen, but it was very clear, and thank you so much.
I would have preferred to come to Helsinki.
We take that as a promise for the next time. Welcome. Then next speaker we will have from Sweden, which is having a very busy weekend as well. And we are very proud that the Kenneth Forstlund, member of the Riksdagen and the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, will discuss now with us. Välkommen Kenneth. Vänta en liten stund så får vi Kenneth på. Siinä näkyykin titteli suomeksikin, valtiopäivien ulkoasiainvaliokunnan puheenjohtaja, demarikollega meille.
Chairman of the Swedish Foreign Affairs Committee, a social democrat, a colleague.
Där är du, Kenneth Forslund. Välkommen till Helsingfors. Tervetuloa Kenneth Suomeen. Thank you very much for participating our seminar, full of people here online as well, and we know that this is very busy weekend for the Social Democrats and also for the members of the national parliaments. Me as a member of the European Parliament, I have very much time to organize very interesting seminars, and we are very, very happy to have you here. We are in the same building than where the Social Democrats of Finland in the next room will have their decision-making meeting in 1 hour, and the party board is already gathering there. And you can tell us, how is Sweden doing? How are you, Sweden? Welcome very much. Floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. And as I understand it, I've been given half an hour here, and just want to check one thing out that I'm uncertain about. Is it possible for you technically, and do you have the wish to also at the end of this 30 minutes also pose some questions, or is that not technically possible for you? Okay, but do you also want to have the opportunity to make some questions, or do you want me to speak on my own, so to say, all the half?
We can, some questions we have had for the previous speakers as well. Great, tack så mycket.
Excellent. Then we're agreeing on the terms. As you say, it's a very hectic time in Swedish politics at the moment, as of course also in Finnish politics. And all of the political discussion in Sweden at the moment is dominated by the security policy issue and most of all, of course, whether Sweden should enter NATO or not. Yesterday, we had a press conference where we presented a report that has been made by a group led by the Foreign Minister Ann Linde and with participation of the Defense Minister Peter Hultqvist, and then representatives of all 8 parties in the Swedish Parliament, Sveriges riksdag. And I was one of the representatives then of the Riksdag for the Social Democrats then. The only one, but one of the representatives of the Riksdag. And in this report that has been made out on, I guess, 1.5 month or something slightly above that, so it's been a very speedy work. We make an analysis of the current situation in Europe after what happened the 24th of February. And the interesting thing is that, as you are surely aware of, in Sweden, there is traditionally very strong different opinions on how to address the NATO issue. Traditionally, 4 parties, the center-right parties, the moderates, the Center Party, the Liberal Party, and the Christian Democratic Party, have for a number of years been in favor of a NATO membership. And the Liberal Party, they are bragging about being the ones who have been in favor of a NATO membership longer than any other party. More lately, the Sweden Democrats, the right-wing populist party, have changed their mind gradually over time, over almost 1.5 years. At first, they changed their opinion in late 2020 and joined with the 4 center-right parties on a position where they were advocating for having a Swedish NATO option, similar to how we see Finland having had a NATO option. And I don't know if you really use that term on your own, but what it's referring to then is the position in the traditional Finnish security policy that you point out, that there is the NATO open door policy, that NATO is open for new members, and that it is a possibility for Finland Sweden Democrats changed their opinion about and joined and then formed a majority with the center-right parties in the Swedish parliament, and claiming then that such a phrase should be included into the Swedish security policy and declaration. And that was then sent to the government, and due to a number of reasons, it's haven't been finalized, the work in the government. I would say that there came a COVID pandemic and some other things that the government was more focused on, and then suddenly we ended up in the situation where we are now. So the government has been criticized in the beginning of this year for not having taken care of this majority decision then in the parliament. But the important thing about this is really the starting change of position for the Sweden Democrats, because then they now recently made yet another change, and they said that, well, we give a mandate to our party leadership that in case of some reason you want to change our traditional no to a NATO, you have the obligation to do that. So very much the NATO issue and decision was then handed over to the party leader and leadership of the Sweden Democrats. And sometime later they came out and said that, well, if Finland is going to enter NATO, then we think that Sweden also should do it. So they were linking their decision very much to the Finnish decision. In the meanwhile, your process started in discussion in Finland, and initially in Sweden, the opinion of the Social Democrats here in Sweden was that, well, perhaps, well, definitely we have to discuss the future security policy of Sweden, but this isn't the right time to make any drastic changes that would risk creating insecurity and destabilize the situation even more. But the situation carried on with the Russian war in Ukraine, and your process went on, and then we also started a process in Sweden. And by that, this group that published its report yesterday then was started by the government, and we had 7 meetings with different experts that we listened to, and also had the opportunity and possibility to pose questions to and discuss with. And we have then concluded on a report where actually all 8 parties agree on the description of the reality today. So the first 4 chapters out of 7 are unanimously, all 8 parties are behind those texts. And that is important because that also shows that we have an equal evaluation of the situation, and that it is Russia that is to be blamed for this current situation. In Swedish politics, historically, decades back, I mean, the left party today. They were once upon a time the Communist Party affiliated to Comintern, and you could realize, I mean, you have your own experiences of this, that in the general political discussion about superpowers and so on, there was traditionally back in time tendencies to be excusing for what the Soviet Union was doing in the former Communist Party and so on. So it's important, I would say, in a mentally way, that all 8 parties so significantly is now saying that it's Russia that should be blamed for the current situation. That's a more important shift, I think, over time than people in general realizes, actually. And also that the Sweden Democrats agree to that, because they have, as many populist parties, a shady history of support and cooperation with Moscow, and then not the communist Moscow, but the authoritarian Moscow that we see today. They have links to the Le Pen's, Marine Le Pen's party in France, for instance. They have received money from them previously, and that money probably, one could guess, actually was lended out by Russian banks to Front National, who then made a loan to the Sweden Democrats. And we have also seen, even in the in April, not this month, but in April, we saw Sweden Democratic members of parliament that were making statements, making excuses and so for the Russian behavior, and trying to blur things up, spreading Russian disinformation and so on. So, but that individual has been at the same time expelled from the party and resigned from the party. So he's now unaffiliated member of the Swedish Parliament. But up until in April, he was actually one of their representatives in the Defense Committee, and he has previously been working in the Defense Commission. The Defense Commission is a working group that is assigned by the government and prepares the long-time defense decisions generally. Now it's been reactivated to see what to do to add more resources to the Swedish Armed Forces. So we're actually back in work with the Defense Commission, and we are about to handle the aim that the government has put up, that the defense spending should be increased up to 2% of the GDP, and how quickly that could be done. That is the work that the Defense Commission is carrying out at the moment. So going back then to the political scale, because this is important to understand, that there has been over time divisions on the description and view of Moscow in the communist time and this authoritarian time. So it's a very important thing that we are agreeing, all 8 parties, on how to describe Russia. Then we come to the second part, the chapters 5, 6, and 7 of the report, where we make the more security policy conclusions. What to do after concluding in the first 4 chapters that this is the reality. And there we don't go all the way down the road saying that Sweden should enter NATO. But if you read these chapters, it's very much discussing about the consequences of not going into NATO or going into NATO. It's also evaluating the different options, a European defense cooperation within the EU. What use could we make out of the Article 42.7 in the EU treaty? what other options are there. We look at the Swedish-Finnish cooperation and come to the conclusion that if you enters NATO, and that will actually weaken the Swedish possibility to defend us, because the cooperation that we have with Finland is the closest one of all cooperations that we have, and it would be a significant setback for the capacity of the Swedish armed forces if you go into NATO and we don't follow you in. And that conclusion is made in this report. This is not agreed by all parties. So the chapters 5, 6, and 7 has the support of 6 parties, but is questioned and not supported by the Green Party and the Left Party, because they very firmly comes to the conclusion that they don't think that Sweden should enter NATO, and that there are many negative consequences, weakening our security and increasing the security threats in our mainly the Baltic Sea region. So there we have different opinions between the parties, but there is not a very specific conclusion in the report with any recommendations on whether to enter NATO or not. But one could, well, I guess probably at least say it's quite favorable of the NATO option in the chapters 5, 6, and 7. And tomorrow then, we have our party board meeting where we, after an intense dialogue all over the country in our 26 regional organizations and a huge number of members taking part both in digital and physical meetings during a very short period of time here, a couple of weeks. We have been listening and discussing with party activists and the ones who are in the regional boards, and also the parliamentary group and the national board of the party. But tomorrow then it will be a final meeting where the party board has to make its mind up and make a decision. And in that meeting and that discussion tomorrow, this report presented yesterday also will be an important input to the discussion and the decision making. And of course, all of the discussions that we have had during the past weeks in our party organization. So that's about where we are at the moment. And I think I've made an overview now, and we could try to have some questions and highlight what you think is most important to get into depth of this discussion.
Så mycket, kiitos. Thank you very much. From greetings from Sweden, from Stockholm to Helsinki. We have stated, and now you can all see that the lines are open. We hardly close them. That is how close we want to work together with Sweden. As Kenneth mentioned, our military practices, our political understanding and friendship is very much shared, so as our geopolitical location. So it's good to have the good neighbors, and we really emphasize that, even though the process itself, we are, of course, autonomous, independent countries to the political situations, and this is what we want to support. Every country has a right to an own decision, but we want to do it in both countries on a very democratic way. And now it's time for the parties also take the position to guide them also, the decision makers in the government and in the parliaments. Nyt jos on kysymyksiä, now we have some minutes for the questions.
Well, now we do have a couple of minutes for questions.
And
Mikko is
any
here,
others
and
from behind 4? Any more? I take Yes, I saw. Yes, from there I saw you. 4 questions, yes. We start from there and go. Please.
Thank you
Kenneth, is it okay to have 4 questions and you have a pen? Yes, perfect.
Yes.
Thank you for your very clear presentation. 50 years before, Olof Palme said that one of the biggest dangers to security and well-being of humanity and nature is ecocide. And then it became a word that had wings to fly, but the world forgot about what Olof Palme had said. Now ecocide is again on the table. The overwhelming majority of members of parliament of Iceland and Denmark, they want their governments to start debating seriously about criminalizing ecocide in international law. Do you foresee any possibility that a majority in the Swedish parliament could take the same attitude as the Danish and Icelandic parliamentarians, and I hope also Finnish parliamentarians eventually?
Thank you. And Mikko Pyhtälä is a former diplomat from Finland. Esa, come here. Yeah, Esa was the second one.
My name is Esa Pulkkinen. I'm the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Defense. I've been working quite a lot with the Finnish-Swedish deep and defense cooperation. If we take in as an assumption and Finland and Sweden will join NATO, how do you see the value of the bilateral Finnish-Swedish cooperation in that context? Thank you.
Thank you. And then there is 2 questions behind.
Hello, I'm a political reporter Inge Molinros from Hufvudstadsbladet. I wonder, how do you see the statement from Turkey's President Erdogan yesterday that Turkey would not support Finnish and Swedish membership of NATO, and how should our countries tackle that?
And 4th one there.
Thank you. My name is Timo Vuorikki, member of the SDP local group. So I would like to ask you about the Defense Commission in Sweden. What's their role in the NATO decision, and what role they may play in making the decision? Thank you.
Det var allt. Kenneth, varsågod.
Thank you. Thank you for 4 very good questions. First of all, I'm so impressed and happy that you remember and know the fact that Olof Palme already back in 1972 at the environmental conference in Stockholm pointed out ecocide. And it's been far too little discussed and handled since, but I think it's a rising question now. As you point out, some parliaments are ahead of us, definitely compared to Sweden. But I would say that since a couple of years, we have a growing discussion about it. I mean, you're all into politics, as I am. You know that when you come with a new idea, mostly it's not instantly adopted. It takes some time. People have to discuss it. They have to realize and understand. And then suddenly everybody is in favor of it. And the funny thing is that all of them in favor are claiming that they were the first to launch it and understand it and the pioneers of the idea. Of course, that wasn't the case, but still, let's keep people happy. And I would say that ecocide, give it some more time in the Swedish political discussion, and there will be probably, I guess, my prediction is that there will be a support for that way of thinking of environmental pollution and how companies and other also state actors are acting, and that you should put those into responsibility for the consequences. So I think it's a growing issue and needs some more time to have the broad support, but I think it will be there. The value of the bilateral Swedish-Finnish cooperation that ESA is asking about, I think that if we enter NATO, both of us, that will definitely be an asset for us in the future cooperation within NATO. And I think that also the Nordic cooperation that we already have in NORDEFCO also would be very much strengthened by a NATO membership in all 5 Nordic countries. It creates definitely possibilities. By that, I'm not taking side whether to enter or not enter, because there are also a number of obstacles with the membership, and those are the ones that we have to discuss tomorrow at the party board meeting. I will be present. I'm specially invited to those meetings at the moment. I'm not a member of the party board, but I'm there in some kind of expert capacity, or how to describe it. Inga from Hufvudstadsbladet is asking about the statement yesterday by President Erdogan. Well, first of all, I wasn't surprised. I mean, we know the capacity of President Erdogan and his political agenda. So that something like that would come, I think, was rather predictable. But we also know we have an ongoing discussion with the Turkish government and different representatives of Turkey from the Swedish side, and I guess that you have it in a similar way from the Finnish side, and the answer and what we feel in those contacts is that there shouldn't be a problem in the end for having decision in the Turkish parliament saying yes to Swedish and Finnish NATO membership if we are asking for it. But of course, this ratification process, it involves 30 countries, and I predict that there might be some surprises in that process. I mean, look at the process a couple of years ago with the CETA agreement between EU and Canada. Who guessed that that would take a sudden stop in a regional Wallonian parliament in Belgium? I don't think that many saw that one coming, so to say. And Timo, finally, the role of the Defence Commission. The Defence Commission is generally working on making suggestions to the government in front of long-term defence decisions, which are 5-year decisions in Swedish in the Swedish system then. We generally make security evaluations, and then we make suggestions on what we think that is needed, both in traditional military way, but also in civil defense planning and the total defense planning. But the role at the moment is slightly different. It's been how to handle and make use as well as possible of an increased defense spending that is pointed out by the government. And we have already for this year reallocated money within the ongoing 5-year defense decision. So there is 800 million Swedish kronor put into the civilian defense and 2 billion kronor put into the military defense extra this year, but that is money redistributed within the frame of the 5-year defense decision. The next thing to handle now is that actually the government has also said that in as near future as possible, we would increase the defense spending up to the 2% level of GDP. And this is a separate political issue from discussing on whether to join NATO or not. And because of that, this overview group of security policy was also instated by the government. Many of us are working in both, but it's not exactly the same persons from the 8 parties. There are some differences in who is representing each party. So there are separate rules, but I hope I've managed to explain the role of the Defense Commission, both its general role over time, but the specific role that it has at the moment, and finally underline that there is 2 different working groups at the moment: the Defense Commission on one hand and the Security Oversight Group on the other hand. So don't mix them up, although many of the individuals are in both groups.
Thank you so much, Kenneth, and also updating the military and security spendings that what many European countries have done. I just can finish by telling you that we are very closely working on a daily basis in the European Parliament with all colleagues from Sweden, socialist colleagues led by Helen Fritzon. So greetings to Helen and others on your meetings. We enjoy having the insights like a daily basis when we work in the European Parliament. Thank you so much, and allt lycka till med veckoslutsmöte och fatta bra beslut.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and have a good continuation of your conference.
Thank you. Ja seuraava puhuja me ollaan saatu paikan päälle meille kaikille tuttu ja tärkeä Eurooppa-ministeri Tytti Tuppurainen. So the next is our dear an important figure for us in Europe, but our Social Democratic European Minister Tytti Tuppurainen. Please welcome, the floor is yours. Mä piipahdan puoluehallituksen puolella, niin mä tuon takaisin.
A very good morning, all of you. Dear friends, dear comrades, dear Mia, Petra and Eero, thank you for this invitation, and I wish all the best to Eero. Get well soon, and for Mia, Petra, congratulations. We are living exceptional times. Well, I wouldn't mind a bit calmer times as well, but here we are, and that's all we can do. Our neighboring Russia has attacked Ukraine, is attacking very violently. A brutal war is going on, trying to invade an independent country, and this is of course something that has made us to think about our own security and think about what actions to take. And also today the Social and Democratic Party of Finland has convened. As you know, the next meeting will start at noon, the party council and other institutions, and after that meeting we know how our party think of Finland's possible application to NATO, or Finland's application to NATO. We are likely to give our support to Prime Minister Sanna Marin that it is time for Finland to join NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Of course, the official decision will be taken in the Finnish parliament, and after that the government will discuss the issue. So here we are. That's all we can do now. That's our only option in this situation under these circumstances. We cannot choose the environmental factors of Finland, and therefore we have to do what we have to do. And of course we can think of how to approach this situation. The realities are well known, and our reaction to that is in our own hands. Dear comrades, I thought about discussing 3 points this morning. First, I'd like to discuss values. One of the main reasons for my political career are values. And this question at stake is about values. But values is not everything. In this situation, we also have to think about security. And unfortunately, Russia's brutal war has emphasized the meaning of security and its significance. It's not only about hard military security, but also other aspects of security. So values, security, and third, Finland's position in the world in this new situation. What is the future of multilateral international cooperation, and what kind of NATO country will Finland be? So I try to speak very briefly in order to have some time for discussion as well. First of all, values. Well, Finland is part of the Western countries. Western values, freedom, democracy, they are the strengths of Finland as well. We have been EU members since 1995. We have taken a decision to be part of European values and European value foundation, and we want to be part of that. We clearly share European values. When we talk about values in Europe, we are not talking about opinions or political stances or something that is related to how things go. But Europe and European Union is based on values. They are listed on Article 2 in the EU Foundation Treaty, that European Union is based on equality, human rights and rule of law and democracy, of course. So these are European values that we 100% share. Now, thinking about these values and think about them in the context of the Russian war, unfortunately, wars do not take place only on some geographical spot. It's not about boundaries and people and countries. It's all about values and ideologies as well. Now Russia clearly wants to detach itself from Western values. It talks about conservative values, conservative models, authoritarian dictatorship almost. So opposition is very much oppressed in Russia. We all know what has happened to those who oppose Russian government, and media freedom is very low in Russia and many other things. So this is what we know now, and it is clear that Russia has chosen different values. Contrary to us, we want to strengthen Finnish and European values, and these strong values have been our strength already for 100 years throughout the existence of Finland. And it's a Finnish miracle that in only 1919, after a brutal, bloody internal war, free elections were organized in Finland. So very quickly after the bloody war, Social Democrats became the biggest power in Finland. Democracy, freedom, and rule of law, they are the key strengths of Finland, and these are the values we fight for in this moment as well. We are not a neutral country anymore. We haven't been a neutral country for decades. We are not somewhere between East and West. We haven't been there for decades. We have been non-aligned, militarily non-aligned. That has been clear, but things have changed now. We have clearly chosen our side. We are a European country, part of the European Union. We are part of European values and cooperation. And against this background, the security has to be analyzed in many different aspects. We have democracy, open societies, media freedom, a lot of political parties debating. We have media who's reporting on everything and anything, and that makes our security, and that creates our total security and resilience. Resilience is an integral part of security, and resilience stems from Finland's values, and these form the basis for for people's trust. People trust in institutions, political system, and the country. So this is the system I cannot stop emphasizing. We cannot protect our countries by arms only. It will remain weak if it doesn't have the support of the people. Only democracies can be strong. Only democracies are strong players, and we have to build our resilience together based on values and based on people's trust. Now we've seen what kind of Russia is there just next to us. Many of us would have wanted to build a peaceful coexistence with Russia. I know, coming from Oulu, northern Finland, it's been very painful to accept and understand why Russia has taken this path. Against this background, we have to think about how to secure Finland, how to strengthen our stability and security, how to guarantee Finland's security and stability also in the future. Of course, our defense is based on very strong military forces, the Finnish Defense Forces and its capabilities. We have to invest a lot in our own military capabilities. We have bought 165 fighters, 2 billion euros invested in budgetary negotiations in Finnish defense, and Finland is very credible in terms of defense spending and defense investments. But of course, we are a small country. We cannot do everything alone. Think about the Winter War. Finland fought very determinedly for 150 days, and everybody knows Finland for that. In the end, Great Britain and France solved the war. They gave their support to Finland, and at that moment Stalin had to take a different situation. So relying on partners was the key to get out of the Winter War. And that was the reason why Soviet Union decided to enter into peace negotiations with Finland, the support of Great Britain and France. Finland couldn't have done it alone. Of course, the public opinion was different. Finland's government needed to enter these negotiations in a situation where the population wanted to keep on fighting. People wanted to continue the war with Russia, but the government understood the severity of the situation and decided to enter the peace negotiations. A small country needs allies, needs partners, and now we have this sense of security that our partners are ready to fight with us, for us. Now we have to ask ourselves whether we want to possibly end up in a situation where Finland would be alone when somebody possibly attacks, or do we want to have the support of others? Then we have to think about what would be the organization or the group of countries that would help us most probably if somebody would attack Finland. This is the question that we've been discussing this spring, and the entire population of Finland almost and the government of Finland have decided that this group of countries is NATO, and NATO's Article 5 mutual security guarantee is what we want in this situation. The NATO security is based on its Article 5. Attack on one is considered as an attack on all, but NATO is of course not only based on values, it is a military alliance. The military alliance expects that its members have a credible defense forces. The United States expects European countries to invest 2% of GDP in its defense forces. Finland has already done this, and now Germany is doing the same, investing 100 million euro in its defense, and many other countries are following. Now, joining NATO would be a natural step to Finland in this situation, also in terms of values. NATO is the basis for EU security and defense as well. If Finland and Sweden join NATO now, there would be 23 European Union member countries belonging to NATO as well. So the memberships are very similar, and this would be a natural continuation to Finland now on this path of Western integration. We are not taking this decision to prove that we are one of the Western countries. We don't have to do this anymore. We are a Western country, and this NATO decision is related to being a small country. We need credible guarantees that we are not left alone if somebody attacks us, and therefore we have to take this decision now, and this is the reason why I'm for Finland's NATO application and joining NATO. So what kind of NATO country would Finland be? Well, thinking about this small country, and of course we need partnerships to be credible country to defend itself. So there is no single solution. We have to also bear in mind that our geographical location is being next to Russia. So we have to look for partnerships, we have to look for cooperation options. I believe in NATO, and I believe that NATO is the most credible partner for securing Finnish security. So I also think that as part of NATO, Finland also has to be an active EU member, deepening the European defense and security policy. This is not competing with NATO structures, it's complementing it. Finland is part of EU and NATO, and together these two facts bring added value to the development of European defense. Maybe in the future there are some technical decisions to be taken, and I think it's very important that Finland still invests in the concretization of the EU Treaty Article 42.7. EU is a very central security and defense actor for Finland. It's not only a security organization, it's very important in terms of economy and trade and multilateral diplomacy, development policy, and it's a major player for securing rules-based world order. But also in terms of security, we also have to develop our bilateral relationships to Sweden and Norway, transatlantic cooperation as well. Finland is an important player in transatlantic cooperation. Finland is going to be a member of NATO soon, but we cannot forget Nordic cooperation. If Finland and Sweden join NATO, now we have a very strong Nordic presence in NATO, and also Arctic dimension shall not be forgotten. We do not have to put any conditions at this stage to NATO. We have to join with open minds, and of course as a NATO member we have both rights and obligations, and the balance between rights and obligations is something that we have to understand here and take it seriously as a future NATO member. For a small country it is so important to have diplomatic and multilateral relationships to many countries in the world, and it is tragic and very sad that Russia is now out of all this operation. The Council of Europe, an important player for human rights and democracy, has left Russia out, and also OSCE, a European Organization for Security and Cooperation, is now not functioning properly because Russia has been left out. Also, UN Security Council cannot operate at the moment because Russia is one of its permanent members. So all these challenges us to think. What is the multilateral organization that we strive for, and what are our targets in the new setting that that Russia has now challenged. And also China has introduced a lot of challenges to multilateral cooperation based on Western values. And it is clear now in this situation that we have to cooperate together with the US in terms of China as well. But I am an optimist. I believe that peace, stability, and reason win in the end. History does not only repeat itself, but it also has many long-term consequences. And now Russia has been put aside from this historic path leading to peace and stability of humankind. But we also have the possibility to return to this path that leads us to peace and stability. United Nations plays a central role here. As a NATO member, Finland also has to remain an active member in the UN and possibly in the future welcome Russia back as well. The UN General Council has been able to take decisions, which is a good thing, and I started my speech with values. EU shares Finland's values and Western values, and these values are not only Western values. I support the opinions of former President Martti Ahtisaari. Democracy, human rights, rule of law, they are not only Western values, they are universal values. They are values that are written in UN conventions, and they belong to every citizen on this earth. To Finns, to Ukrainians, to Russians and Chinese. And for this, my dear comrades, we work for and we fight for. Thank you very much.
We have 2 minutes. At 12, we start the extraordinary party council meeting, and a soup lunch is served outside as well. If there are any questions, I can see 2 or 3 there. Tytti will jot them down and then answer to them collectively.
Reijo Päivärinta, niin kiitoksia esityksistä. Olisin ihan lyhyesti kysynyt, minkälaisia näkymiä aseriisuntaneuvotteluilla mahtaa olla tämmöisessä tilanteessa,
there for disarmament in such a situation where we talk about defense policy, investments increased and this negative impact on peace? Is there any way for this positive peace movement and disarmament? This is not really a question, but a thanks and comment. Since I'm already part of the elderly population, it's quite difficult to change your thinking and thinking about moving towards NATO, because we have thought that we should be always there in between and support the democracy development in Russia. And it's very difficult to turn around this thought. And it was very nice to listen, even though you're not a young girl anyway, but still youthful. So your youthful thoughts that we are living in new times now, we have to take new decisions. It was a very refreshing point of view, so thank you very much. I start coughing when you tell me that I'm youthful. My daughter is 22, she is young. Yes, an old social democrat. Yesterday I listened to Erdogan, and now what Kenneth Forslund said about that, I was quite strucken. Was it just some commercial policy comment from Erdogan when we remember him from the refugee situation? Won't this lead to a common negative point of view from the NATO member states? Yes, thank you. First of all, the question on disarmament is very close to my heart, and I don't have to provide any evidence for my pacifism. I've always very warmly supported all this armament and peace movement, because they are very effective ways. But we don't often think about the different agreements and treaties on how we have been able to limit the impact of nuclear weapons, for example. And I believe in this, and I'm sure that we can come back to the negotiating tables later on. But I do have to admit that we are now undergoing an unprecedented circle of armament, race for armament, and all the defense materials we would need to purchase. We don't even have availability for all of that. But these are things we don't just purchase when we want. We need a defense industry and capacity to produce this. But I think it's very important that Finland is active in these negotiations and tries to promote disarmament in the longer term, that we will make plows out of missiles later on. But we have to defend our common value base. We are an open society, and our values are soft values. To be able to protect our sensitive, soft society, we have to be hard. And I'm ready for that, and I'm sure that the leadership in Finland is ready for that as well. But that's not a never-ending path. And in the longer term, we can strive for disarmament. I think that Turkey is a good example and shows that NATO is not an alliance which is always unanimous on everything. 30 different countries who all have to ratify Finnish membership of NATO, and I'm sure that we can expect very many and various kinds of opinions. We heard from Erdogan, we've heard from the Romanian president, their opinions on this question, but I don't doubt that Turkey would cause hurdles on the Finnish way towards NATO that we couldn't overcome. And I'm not going to evaluate all the motivations behind Erdogan's speech, but as from the Scandinavian countries, one could look at the map and notice that, of course, Finland supports very strongly combating terrorism, and Turkey is in many senses an ally to us. And also in NATO, counterterrorism is high on the agenda, and Finland could provide value added to things and questions that are very important to Turkey as well, that is counterterrorism. But it was a very kind of welcome greeting. Of course, I'm not happy about what he said, but it was a reminder to us that the declaration from our heads of state this Thursday was not a happy day. It was not a day for celebration, but it was a very pragmatic information on what Finland has to do now from our own Finnish interest. How can we secure and defend the security of the Finnish population? Our position is now clear. The declaration of the heads of state made it very clear that this is what we want to do. We might have to campaign in favor of our membership so that we are accepted in all NATO member states. I'm sure that this is not just a walk in the park for us, although we were very welcome in Washington. I came back from there just a moment ago. So we had a very strong parliamentary bipartisan support for the Finnish membership in NATO. But these are things we have to be prepared to speak in favor of, and we have to be able to defend our interests and understand that NATO membership would bring about both obligations as well as rights. Thank you.
Kiitos valtavasti Tytille, kun
olit
ihan vielä paikan päälläkin. Ja siirrymme tuohon alakertaan, mutta vedän vaan loppuun yhteen sen, että olemme ehdottomasti... Odotatko Tytti minuutin? Meillä on tuossa meillä on kaikilla tehtävämme, niin kuin puhuin, se, että kansakunta on vahva, me on yhtenäisiä, me tiedämme hybridivaikuttamista ja hajaantumista käytetään strategiana meitä vastaan. Ja sillä lailla me olemme jokainen tässä. Me emme voi ulkoistaa sitä ministereille tai puolustusministeriölle, vaan on aina kyse kansakunnan tahdosta, kun olemme demokratia. Ja Tytti mainitsi vielä tuossa transatlanttiset suhteet, niin itse olen ensi viikonlopun 8 kongressiedustajan kanssa Pariisissa, olen parlamentissa juurikin Yhdysvaltain delegaation
Paris, and I have to tell them about what Finland in the northernmost corner of Europe is doing, because the world is big. 28 EU member states, we meet with our colleagues and we will see if our government will send an application to NATO. I think that unity is the best here in Finland as well in the EU, and we are strong together. Thank you for today's seminar. And I'd like to thank both Esa and Tytti with some spring flowers. Have a very nice weekend.